and get going. All right, welcome everybody. It's so good to see you all again for this June seminar. Now, this is actually a seminar we've been hoping and wanting to do for a really long time. Community engaged research is something that I personally think we need to do a lot more of, and it's something that I think fits so remarkably well with advancing the science on recovery community centers. And certainly all of you, just by being here and sharing your thoughts and comments and ideas here, as well as over email, is all contributing to that. So we just wanted to shine the spotlight on community engaged research, the underpinnings of what it is and why it's so important to do. That's going to be Dr. Devin Banks, who's going to be explaining that to us. And then we wanted to showcase two amazing examples of different kinds of ways of doing that. And our goal, and I'll tell you what our goal is. Our goal is that all of you will want to do more of this kind of research, and that you'll apply for our pilot funding for the October deadline, and that you'll tell us what kind of resources you'll need to make it more useful, more accessible and useful to you all. So we have high hopes and high dreams, and we're really excited that all of you are taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here today. All right, Theodora, can you start us off with our usual slides to just get us all on the normal page again? All right, so just as a reminder, this seminar series is funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and our goal is to advance the science on recovery community centers. All of the activities that come out of it, the seminars and the pilot funding and the materials that we put together, is led and reviewed by this team from our steering committee, which is a multi-stakeholder team from different experiences in different places around the country. Next slide, please. We are really happy that the people who come to our seminars are also coming from different perspectives, so we can really share and cross-fertilize and approach issues from multiple perspectives. So this is just a pie chart of who we typically have, and we always include a poll to find out who is in the room, so we can reach out to the stakeholder groups we are not reaching very well. Next slide, please. Since we've started this 2 years ago, we have also become part of a consortium of addiction recovery science. I know I mentioned CORSI before, but I always want to mention it because while we are focusing specifically on recovery community centers, this larger group spanning multiple NIDA-funded projects is talking about advancing the science of all recovery support services. And there is a number of different activities that this group does in a variety of ways, and it's not just scientist facing, although there are postdoctoral positions and there's seminars, but there's also public facing seminars. There's also opportunities to collaborate and pilot studies and so forth. So we just put the slide together for you every month to highlight some upcoming things. I'm not going to go through the slide except to include it here so you have it when we mail out materials email out materials next week. Next slide, please. And actually go back 1 second. Amy, did you want to say anything to highlight the recovery housing part that we are highlighting here? Because that, I think, is a really great thing that you're doing for Recovery Housing 101.
Sure. Thank you, Bettina. Next Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, is the first in our training series for recovery housing. Actually, anyone who's interested in recovery housing. It's our Recovery Housing 101, a lead off of our training series. The training series actually has 2 tracks, one for recovery operator providers, and for researchers as well, folks who are interested in studying recovery housing research. But the June webinar next Tuesday is for all audiences, just to serve as a grounding for anyone who wants to know anything about recovery housing. So thank you, Bettina.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. All right, Theodora, now really next slide. I'm not going to trick you again. All right, to reground us and refocus us on recovery community centers, we have with us a wonderful live feature presentation again. And Elizabeth Bergvidi is going to tell us about Sea Change Recovery Community Organization. And her task is to give us a view of what it is like if somebody walks through the center of the doors of her RCC. Elizabeth, can you go ahead?
I sure can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I'm really thrilled to be here and to introduce our work to all of you. I'm particularly interested in our speakers today, and will give you an abbreviation of why that is. So Sea Change Recovery Community Organization, which has a center, is on a mission to crush the stigma of substance use disorder and what it means to be in recovery. What makes us a little different, I think, than anybody else in the field at the moment, although I'd love to learn other organizations doing the same, is that we're working at the intersection of boots on the ground, community-based recovery services, and very importantly, organizing people power for systemic change to save, heal, and empower lives. So at our center, we are located on a bus route. We are in a rural part of New Jersey. And one can get to us by public transportation, which we feel is very important for many people who are struggling with addiction or using drugs, do not have proper transportation where we live. So they can walk in the door, they can call us at the front door if the door is locked, because we don't always leave it open. And they can come in and they can receive everything for free, one-on-one support. We have support groups 7 days a week, and 3 of those 3 days a week, twice a day. We have physical and holistic activities, Reiki, Qigong, meditation, yoga, CrossFit, which we actually partner with folks that do that professionally, and they donate their services to us, and we can help transport people to get to those classes. And then we provide harm reduction tools. So we have hygiene kits, we have Narcan, we have drug testing kits, specifically fentanyl testing kits at the moment. We're trying to get xylazine testing kits. We've had a few and we're trying to get more. So we work very closely with the New Jersey Harm Reduction Coalition and the New Jersey Department of Health in getting a lot of these materials that we hand out freely. But what I think is really great is that we are a vehicle for change in the lives of those negatively impacted by substance use. So not only can they get the support, unconditional support and resources, we also really work to lift people up and help them step into their own power to join us in a fight for change. As organizers, and we're partnered with New Jersey Organizing Project, and together through Sea Change and NJOP, we've created a campaign called Not One More. And we believe people who use drugs have a basic human right to quality, compassionate healthcare, and we fight for that. We really fight for transparency, accountability, and oversight in treatment, recovery, housing, drug courts, and government funding. We are watching very closely the opioid settlement funding. And then we believe, obviously, through organizing, we believe in community leadership. We believe that we're the experts on the topic of recovery and addiction, and we teach people how to join us and tell their stories in Trenton. And essentially all of our recovery services through the RCO, the RCC, we sort of heal, thrive, empower, and lift everyone up to make our reach even further. And interestingly, I just want to add through, we will be applying for pilot funding. We recently worked with a researcher to identify particular hotspots, and our recovery community was then trained to do deep canvassing, and we've gone into these hotspot areas, and we are talking directly with people one-on-one about the care they're either needing and not getting, or gaps in care. And we're taking, we're compiling all of this information that we're getting and providing and doing a report on that, hopefully coming up. So we're a very active kind of new model in terms of bringing organizers and recovery services together to really make a deeper change in New Jersey. And we're finding it has been so successful, and I'm going to end it here, that we've we've been given funding to kind of train other states on how this model works. And so we've just established and launched in the past month the National Sea Change Coalition, where we're going to bring other like-minded folks, RCCs, RCOs, and organizers together to create a space in their own backyard that works kind of similarly to what we're doing here. So there's a lot to report. I hope I covered everything. And I'm sure my contact information will be in the meeting chat. And I would love to get to know all of you a little bit more. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was great. All right. Then for our next slide, Deodora, the next thing we have to do, I believe, is the poll, right? Here we go. So we just want to ask our usual polling questions. You will see our usual demographic questions about who you are and what stakeholder groups you identify with. And then we have some questions about, you can go ahead and launch some questions about the actual content, the community engaged research part. So hopefully it's not too lengthy. Take your time to do it. So you do need to scroll on the right-hand side to get all the way to the bottom. And for those of you who just joined, I don't know if you can see it, but we just started our usual poll about who's in the room and some questions for food for thought for the presentations to come. Nearly there. We have about 78% of the folks having responded. So we'll give it just like another minute or two.
Great, we're at about 81%. Would you like me to end?
Yeah, please go ahead. All right, and I think actually if you can click the share results button so that everybody can see. perfect. So we do have our stakeholder groups represented except for prescribers who will have to reach out separately. So those are our demographics. And then regarding community engaged research. So the big 38% said I've heard the term before, but I'm here to learn more. That's perfect. You're at exactly the right spot. And then there's the next most commonly endorsed answer was I'm doing community engaged research and I'm imagining it's cut off and I want to do better at it, I believe, if I recall the item correctly. So perfect. That's exactly what we're all hoping to do for each other here today. And then this question, I really love the answers here. The highest priority, and this is thanks to Ashli that we switched it to the highest priority. We used to have a check all that apply, but really think about what's most important to us. You know, there's this big chunk here about building relationships. So that's what we want to do. And that's great. And that's another reason why you're all here to help build our community here, to help each other build our relationships. Love to see that. All right. And then we have the things about if you're going to do communication research, what parts do you want to contribute to? The list is long. Lots of things go into any research project. And I'd love to see so much for every single one of them. That's great. All right, perfect. So if you can stop sharing, Theodora, we'll move right along to the main part of today's event. All right, I mentioned earlier that we are sort of doing this in 3 parts. Devin Banks is going to give us an overview about what community engaged research is and why it is so important. And then we have 2 teams giving examples of how they are doing it. We're going to have Ashli Sheidow and Terrence McTier talk about the Community Advisory Board. And then we will have Chyrell Bellamy and Reverend Robyn talk about the Imani Project. They're both different kinds of community engagement, and you'll see where they fall on the spectrum, and they'll give us insight into what they are. So Devin, if I could ask you to go next, we'll stop sharing so you can start sharing your slides.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you for having me. Again, my name is Devin Banks. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and I'm gonna, as briefly as I can, try to introduce you to community engaged research and why it's important. I'll say 10 minutes is certainly not enough time. So this is truly a crash course, but hopefully it'll give you a sense for, especially for those of you who said you've heard the term before and you want to learn more, and get us all kind of on the same page before we hear about the wonderful examples that my co-presenters have for you today. So before we define community engaged research, maybe we can break down the term a bit and start to define first of all, what are we even talking about when we're talking about community? So a community is typically defined, actually this is an empirical based definition, a group of people with diverse characteristics who have kind of 3 characteristics. 1, they are linked by social ties. 2, they share common perspectives. And 3, they engage in joint action in a geographical location or setting. So pretty straightforward. People who are socially related have some type of commonalities and are geographically working together in some way, shape, or form. I also think it's important to consider, though, how the federal government is defining community in terms of those of us who might be interested in getting funding to support our community engaged research. So this is actually a definition that I drew from NIDA, one of their recent requests for fund RFAs. So similarly, a specific group of people often living in a defined geographic area who share a common culture, values, and norms, and who are arranged in a social structure according to relationships the community has developed over a period of time. And then they give a bunch of examples. So communities might be self-defined, like the Black or African American community in a city or county, or defined by a catchment area of a local government or service provider. So a catchment area is usually refers to an area that is served by an institution like a school or a hospital. And then they provided some other examples, including neighborhoods, reservations or tribal communities, military bases, or college campuses. So we can see that community is broadly defined, and the community, it's important though to define the community that you are interested in and that you are part of before you can engage in community engaged research. So for me, my work is really focused at the intersection of racial health equity and substance use and addiction. So often the community that I am engaging includes Black people or people of color who identify as people who use drugs or people in recovery or addiction. And defining that community makes it very clear to me who I'm looking to work with when I'm doing community engaged research. So whether you are a community member or a researcher, a scientist, it's important to think about and define what communities you are a part of or what communities you are interested in serving. So now that we know a little bit more about what community is, maybe we can talk about what community engagement is. Community engagement is a spectrum. This is the continuum of community engagement and research by he and colleagues that is linked in the email that you got today from the seminar. So you'll see that the spectrum really goes from no community involvement. The community is not included in any aspects of the research. The researcher works independently of the community, all the way to community-driven led. So the further right you get, the more community engaged it is according to this spectrum. So you can see here that if you're a scientist, you might be really familiar with some of the far left. If you've done any secondary data analysis, maybe you had a question and you from start to finish just took some data, analyzed it, published it, and the community had no idea what was that you did that, and they were not involved at all. You might have done community informed research, like you heard in a meeting or you heard from the media or something that there was a certain or you heard from a clinician that a community was going through a certain problem and that sparked an idea and you did a research project. So that was community informed, but you didn't include the community in it. And so they may or may not know that they're actually informing. And then you get to community consultation. And this is where you make a shift where you are engaging the community intentionally and typically paying them because they are consultants. You consult with the community, but this usually happens on the front end or back end. It usually is like, how do we set up this study, or how do we recruit for this study? And at the back end, how do we disseminate these results, right? Or make them relevant or do appropriate science communication. So this is one way to look at this spectrum. I actually prefer, this way to look at the spectrum because it says at the top, you see the community's perspective experience, and at the bottom, you see the researcher's perspective and experience, right? So wherever you are, you can kind of orient yourself to the top or the bottom of the spectrum here. Now, I will say, I talked about the first three things on the spectrum. In my personal opinion, what is in the yellow box would be considered community engaged research. And I think there are some community engaged researchers who agree with me, and there are others who might move this box a little bit further to the right. But the difference really for me in the shift from community consultation to community participation is you have defined roles for community members. And whether that's an MOU or some other type of agreement, the community knows exactly what part they are playing in this research. So, and you can see the way the language changes as well, right? Like researchers provided specific opportunities for us to participate. That's community participation. You'll see in community initiation, we told researchers what questions we needed answers for, right? And they helped us get those answers. And then in community-based participatory research and community-driven led research, the community is even more involved. in community-based participatory research, or CBPR, the community members participate in all aspects equitably, not equally, but equitably according to their expertise and the researcher's expertise. And then in community-driven or led, you see it says, we fully own the research. So this is a really kind of radical, progressive form of community engaged research, and the researcher is in a supportive role. So this is why I would put this in the yellow, these things in the yellow box of what I would call community engaged research, is because the community has a defined role from beginning to end. And I'll give you some examples of what these mean. So in community participation, you might this might include like a patient advisory board. So you've recruited a patient advisory board, you've created some specific, a memorandum of understanding. The patient advisory board knows they meet every 2 weeks or every month, and they have an agenda, and this is how they're going to contribute to your research, right? Across all stages of the study, maybe they consult with you about the research. An example of community-driven research is one in the field of substance use. I know is something that the Urban Survivors Union is doing, is community-driven research. So there are a set of people in the Urban Survivors Union who are on methadone maintenance and who have really recognized some specific gaps to methadone maintenance, as well as specific gaps to working with researchers in the traditional paradigm. And so they actually engaged in community-driven research and did their own survey and studies and engaged researchers to help them move forward some of the publication and IRB and more nitty-gritty research aspects of the science. But they led the research question, they led the data collection, and this all came from people who were part of this community of people on methadone maintenance. And then CBPR, which I think you'll hopefully hear a little bit more about today, is actually a specific methodology. And it's based on two specific principles. These principles are the principle of ethics and community empowerment. And so the purpose of, sorry, I'm having mouse problems. The purpose of this, of CBPR, is to really equitably involve community members in the research process to improve data and research quality and community health. So why would I do community engaged research? So if you're a researcher, I'll say, because like I just said, it improves quality, impact, and effectiveness of research, including recruitment efforts, intervention quality and relevance, cultural responsiveness, as well as dissemination of findings to the actual affected groups. So really reducing that research to implementation pipeline, because you're already engaged with the community. For community members, it has been shown to increase self-efficacy and capacity to participate in health, in health among community members. And it also may help reduce health inequities and improve health for marginalized communities. And for both groups of people, it builds ongoing partnerships between researchers and communities that benefit underserved and marginalized groups. So overall, if you ask me why do community engaged research, I would say because the key principles of community engaged research aim to transfer power to make health changes from the dominant institutions that traditionally hold it, like research institutions, to marginalized communities, either communities of color, communities of people who use drugs, et cetera, that have been historically denied it. And so on principle, I think we should be doing community engaged research. So what I want to leave you with today, these are some of the principles of community-based participatory research. I'll read them to you briefly, but as I read them to you, what I hope is that you take a couple to heart, maybe write a couple down and see how they show up in the examples that you're going to hear about after I stop talking. So some of the principles of CBPR is that they acknowledge community as a unit of identity. It builds on community strengths and resources. It facilitates a collaborative and equitable partnership in all phases of the research, involving empowering and power sharing processes attending to social inequalities. It fosters co-learning and capacity building among all partners, researchers, and community members. It integrates a balance between knowledge generation and intervention for the mutual benefit of all partners. So it can't just be about knowledge, it also has to be about intervention and mutual benefit. It focuses on local relevance of public health problems and takes ecological perspectives on determinants of health, not just individual perspectives. It involves systems development using a cyclical and iterative process. You have to be flexible. It disseminates results to all partners and involves them in the strategy to more widely disseminate results. And it involves a long-term process and commitment to sustainability. So maybe a couple of those bullet points really stand out to you, and I would encourage you to think about how you see some of these principles show up in the examples my colleagues give today. And I thank you for your attention.
Awesome. Thank you, Devin. We have a quick question here from Kenneth Smith that I wanted to share. He asks, what about partnerships that involve capacity building of community organizations, where the research is about analyzing the implementation to support other communities? How would you characterize that?
So I think what you're asking about is about evaluation, right, in community organizations, which some people see research and evaluation as the same thing, but perhaps to different ends. One's about knowledge generation and one's about like improving processes. So the extent to which it kind of depends, right, on because sometimes in evaluation, community orgs say, hey, researchers, here's our data, come in and do this, we need this. So that might be community initiated, but not community engaged. So it really depends on that role of community. What is the role of the community org and the people at the community org, and particularly the people the community organization is serving in those kind of evaluation tasks. I think that's what Kenneth was asking, but I'm happy to follow up. In terms of, I'm just going to answer a few quick questions here, and then I'll be quiet to let my colleagues go forth. But Lawrence asked a question about how much are communities involved during the initial grant planning. I'll say in like CBEPR, they should be involved during the initial grant planning. Obviously, the scientist might have more grantsmanship experience and knowledge, and that's where the equity really comes in, right? Like, how can the community say, oh, hey, here's some data from our community organization, or here's some anecdotal evidence about what we're seeing on the ground that you can incorporate as preliminary data, right, into your grant. And of course, they're going to write letters of support and so forth. But although those scientists might do the bulk of the grant writing and the grantsmanship, you should be running that by your community partners at all times in order to make sure that what you say you're going to do in the grant is actually going to be most impactful to the community that you're working with. In terms of interpretation and analysis of study results, I think this really depends. If you're doing community-driven research, you have to build power in your community members to be able to help with the analysis. Again, we're talking about equity, not equality. So we aren't sharing analysis directly one-to-one with community members because we have different strengths. But some of their strengths are really in interpretation, right? Your strengths might be in data analysis, and you might think you know what this means, and then you put it in front of your community partner, and they're like, absolutely, that's not what it means at all, right? So I think and that interpretation is really important in community engaged research, and that goes right into publications. Again, I might do the bulk of the writing, but I'm making sure their interpretation is included in that writing, and that everything I'm writing, they're able to approve before we submit it for publication. Good questions.
Perfect. I just saw another question coming in about person-centered research, how that compares. I'm going to save that one for later on because I thought it would be nice to hear the examples here, and hopefully the next speakers can talk about some of these issues too, about how you tackled involving in grant writing, how person-centered it is, and how you tackle analyses together. So next I want to invite Ashli and Terrence to give us some insight into community advisory boards and what they have done.
Thanks. I feel very honored to share this space with you, and I feel like I could sit here for about 2 or 3 hour long course with Devin because the way that she captured things and sort of highlighted key points, I think it will get echoed in what I'm going to talk about at least. So for those of you who don't know that I lead a project called the Jeep Initiative. And I'll make sure that I put the web link in the chat. So it's a 5-year project that's funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And our aim there is to advance research on recovery support services, and in particular, peer support services and recovery residences. And then within that, we also emphasize 2 populations, emerging adults and then adults of any age with criminal legal system involvement. And so but the work of the Jeep Initiative is done entirely in partnership with people from impacted communities. And we use community-based participatory, we at least try to adhere to community-based participatory research. So the CBPR that Devin was talking about. I just wanted to share a few pointers, and then I'll turn it over to Terrence to talk about his experience. And these are really pointers that are lessons learned from a researcher perspective. So, following those principles of CBPR and really, stopping yourself, is this the best way that we could adhere most closely to those ideas of CBPR? We also focus on using a cultural exchange approach. And so, like Devin said, our goal, and I really urge you to work towards this, is to have that genuine partnership where you have where each member is bringing expertise to the table, and really having that as a primary thing you keep in mind, that the educational and the experiential expertise and being able to share and learn from one another, and having that be the focus and the sort of primary goal that you're aiming towards. We have been we have to constantly remind ourselves to ensure we keep that bi-directional communication, because when you're with a bunch of researchers, it's a lot easier for us to have this bi-directional communication where we have an idea, we talk about the idea, we gather ideas from and improve it, and we're all sort of talking about research, and it just sort of naturally happens that we have that bi-directional communication where that mentor that I talked to, I go back to them and say hey, we talked about this and look what I'm doing with it now, and what do you think about that? It sort of happens more organically. With the community members we're working with, we just have to be more intentional about that. And I think we also have to remind other investigators who come and share things with our boards that we need them to keep in mind that it's that iterative that iterative sort of communication loop and circling back, so people know that their contribution had impact. You're not just going to the community board, gathering advice, and then off and running, with it. It's coming back to those boards, and we figure out different ways. We've, made little TikTok videos and other ways to send back to them and say hey, I know I'm not going to be able to come back to your board meeting, but I wanted to let you know this is how your guidance has particularly helped us to do better work. So that sort of iterative piece, I think, has an important role. I also think just stating your intentions very clearly. We have this idea that that lived experience is an unparalleled expertise, and it's an expertise that has been largely missing from research conversations, and that we are actively trying to use methods to form a genuine partnership to overcome that. And so just stating those intentions very clearly. I'm going to pop into the chat. This is for a different project that I'm working with, where we are recruiting people from impacted communities. And in the way we try to advertise, the type of language that we use, we just really try to make sure that we are cognizant of the messaging of how we want to form that genuine relationship. And I also say with that, don't underestimate the time that it takes to recruit and form and sustain community boards and use, at least for CBPR level of work. So don't underestimate that. It's really exciting to see that NIH is starting to embed that type of funding within their calls for research studies so that you can put the effort towards that. Another pointer or tip or lesson learned is, my personal take is, I don't use it, we don't use advisory in our, it's a community board, or it might be a partner board or partner panels. I feel like advisory, it sort of feels like a demotion versus what we wanted to achieve. So it's that meaningful partnership. Like Devin said, I think there's that community consultation. And yeah, I feel like that's where community advisory board sort of fits better. But when you're trying to work up that spectrum, I think that's where you even think about your messaging and are they your advisors or are they your partners? And so that's just our personal take. Do what you want with it. And then preparing, in some of this work, there's often a focus on preparing the board members, the community board members, to partner with you as a researcher. So like giving them a little bit of guidance about the research methodology. But I think just as important and often overlooked is preparing the investigators to work with a board. So we use, there's a toolkit for domestic violence researchers that we used and pulled out. I think Jackie Bruce may be on the thing. She helped us to sort of go through, and a couple of our staff, to pull out specific aspects of it so that our researchers need to read that and watch some videos and sort of prepare themselves for what the CBPR experience should be like, what role they should have in that. And that circling back piece. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is, and I'll do more, is putting a link in the chat for you, is that because recovery science was newer, and it's particularly when it comes to certain populations, the first work that we did with our community board partners was to generate the research ideas and what the priorities within that should be. And it has been one of the most energizing experiences that I've had. And so I encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to go in that direction. We describe doing it in a toolkit, and that's what I'll post into the chat. And it also came along with some great research questions that are open for anyone to use. And we have that, those are all available online. So I'll leave it with that, but I just wanted to hit on sort of a variety, and I'll turn it to Terrence.
Cool. Thank you, Ashli, for that foundation for the JEEP initiative. Greetings, everyone. I am Dr. Terrence McTier. I am one of the board members for one of the community boards, I guess, that exist with the JEEP initiative. So I am one of the co-facilitators for the Justice Involved Community Board. As Ashli mentioned, there are two other community boards that exist under the JEEP initiative. And that's the Provider and Payer Community Board and the Young Adult Community Board. So I'm with the Justice Involved Community Board. Now I will talk a little bit about my experience with this particular community board. I also have a unique experience as it relates to serving on the Justice Involved Community Board. I am also a trained researcher and a published researcher as well. And so as I'm coming into this board, I'm sometimes critical about how individuals do research, especially with working with people with lived experience. Myself, I am a person with lived experience, and I'm very peculiar about people who say they do participatory action research or community-based research without actually involving those with lived experience. And so this has been a really great experience thus far. I've been with the JEEP initiative almost going on 3 years now. It's been so long. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the successes of the JEEP initiative and how they have really honed in on actually engaging with those with lived experience, as Ashli mentioned, as experts. And that's critical when doing this particular type of work. And so when it comes to sitting as a community board member, One of the things that I appreciate about the Jeep initiative is from the onset, they allowed us to define the research priorities, right? And you have a number of people with lived experience on this particular community board with varying levels of research experience, various levels of knowledge, but they created a space where all can come to the table and to share their experiences because they are experts, right? We are experts. We really honed it on communities of color, right? Some of those areas that don't often get access to research and resources. And so because of our expertise and our knowledge and our push for getting some research in those particular areas, the researchers who come to this community board was actually able to start developing research ideas and research agendas to get into those communities and to provide the necessary research and resources for communities that will often be overlooked in the research paradigm, I guess, in a sense. As it relates to the community board, we meet, we started out meeting monthly and then we went to bi-monthly. And we meet for an hour and then it increased to about an hour and a half. That's how engaged we are with the Jeep initiative. We provide so much input into the design, to the analysis, to, I'm trying to think of everything that we do. The researchers come back to us with their ideas. We provide that critique. We provide the kudos and the thank yous for taking into consideration the things that we brought forth. And they go back to refine their research projects, refine their findings and things of that nature, and then they disseminate that into the communities. And we also assist with that. The other piece that I think is critical when doing participatory action research or community-based research is funding, right? Oftentimes researchers want to pull out knowledge, but they don't pour back into the individuals who are really taking the time out of their day to impart that knowledge into whomever, right? And so we are paid for our expertise. And it always somehow increases in the amount of pay, right? So we started out with the base pay, and over time it has increased, and it shows how valuable we are to the Jeep initiative. So much so that we don't hardly have a huge turnover of community board members, because yes, the payment is great. I love to get paid for the work that I do, but it's not just about the pay. They talk about that engagement. We see ourselves in that research. We're getting paid for our insight and our intellect, but also they treat us with respect. They treat us as peers and not, as Ashli stated, that advisor, kind of feeling like that step below. And so we have a really good retainment of community board members. Like I said, I've been with the Jeep initiative since the inception of the community board. And as long as it's here, I plan on being a part of it. And I speak on behalf, I think I can speak on behalf of my other community board members, that they also see the value and input in staying put, because we see people putting their money where their mouth is. They're actually engaging us. The other piece that
Terrence,
yes.
I'm sorry to cut a little bit off. We only have 9 minutes left. We still want to hear from the Mani project. Can you do concluding thoughts? I'm very sorry. We always go long. Do you want to do a concluding thought?
Oh yeah, I'll do a concluding thought. My bad. So the major thing is that I guess focusing on the Jeep initiative is that you have to really compensate people for their time. Not just financially, but you have to invest. And if you go to the website, I posted in the chat, Ashli also posted some other links in the chat. They do payment, but there's also opportunities for us to really engage, whether it's in conferences, training institutes, participating in other studies. There's a number of things that we also benefit from as community members, our community board members, but also those who are getting the research, they're also benefiting from the knowledge as well. So excited to be a part of this and to continue the work. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Chyrell and Reverend Robyn, if you want to go ahead. And for those of you who have to jump off at 1, the presentation team will stay until 1:30 and we can keep recording. So you guys will have everything and the slides you're all going to get.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I know we don't have that much time, so I'm going to skip through some of these slides and really get to the meat of this, which is to introduce Reverend Robyn Anderson, our church liaison, who can talk really about her experiences. Just a quick thank you to all of you for having us today. I am Chyrell Bellamy. I am professor at Yale. More importantly, I identify as a person with my own lived experience of mental illness and addiction, and it's important to my life, and it's important in all the work that I do. A quick shout out to my co-PI, Dr. Ayana Jordan, and all of the people who have helped create the Imani Breakthrough. But special thanks to our churches, our pastors, our facilitators, and people with lived experience attending Imani, but most important, in memory of the many that we have lost to the opioid epidemic. These are our church facilitators, people with lived experience and people in the churches. And these are our Imani pastors. Just a quick poem. This was developed by my friend and colleague, Imani Harrington. Imani is a playwright that lives in San Francisco, and she and I co-wrote a book of plays and monologues called Positive Negative Women of Color in HIV and AIDS. We need you. We need you, our brothers, our sisters, and our people. Help us reaffirm ourselves in loving ourselves. Hold us when we can't stand. The soles of shoes have traveled on our backs for so long. We need you, our brothers, our sisters, and our people. And to me, I love reading this poem because this, to me, gets to the essence of why this work is critical and important in the first place. Because not only do community members need us in affirming, that love, we need that for ourselves too. Imani aims to promote health and healing for ourselves and our communities, and how this is accomplished by creating a sense of unity and creating a sense of collective responsibility that we are all in this together. And just quickly, the evolution of the Imani program. This was first funded through our state, through the state opioid response crisis. And but as you can see, we've been able to expand. We started first with 4 Black churches, and then we added on 4 Latino churches where we had to do further modification. We then were able to use research from those projects to apply for an NIH UO1, where we're now doing a randomized clinical trial with a medication for addiction treatment option as part of that randomized controlled trial. And we're doing that in 6 Connecticut churches. We're also now doing Imani program initiatives in Rhode Island, which we're really excited about. We're starting there, doing training in June. And then we're also starting in New Orleans in the June, July. So I'll say this, why Imani and why with churches? And I just want to say that it's critical that we start with the why. And the reason why we start with the why in all of our work is because, one, it keeps us in touch with why this is important in the first place. The other thing is because when we are bogged down, it's always important to go back to that why. And the last thing is because there will be tension between community and academic researchers. So when that happens, again, let's go back to the why and why this is important in the first place. And with that, I'm going to introduce Reverend Robyn Anderson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Certainly good to be here today, and also to hear the projects that have gone forth also, and just to be talking about community research. I am, again, as I always speak about Imani, I think Imani is the best program in the whole wide world. And I also think that it also has the results that shows the effectiveness of this program, especially as it relates to, I worked for many years, for over 35 years in traditional treatment. And to see persons really receiving services in their communities also, that has also been tailor-made for the community that they live in and who they are as people. And so one of the things that I would say that Imani did from the beginning is that they actually came to us and we got a group of people together, a group of faith leaders, as well as persons from the community, and just really talked about the opioid crisis and what needs to be done. And so even as pastors, and I'm a pastor myself as a faith leader, many people, I can't tell you, over the years have come to us and talked about being a part of research, or they were doing research and got information from us, and then went on off with their grant and did whatever they did with the research, never came back and returned back to us to even give us, to let us know what the results were, nor did they really involve us in that process. And so Imani did that from the beginning. This project, again, is what I call a true collaboration, a true partnership, because they also saw that churches are not just on Sundays or not just about their members, but every church is a part of a community. And so they're an integral part of that community. And so we had our focus groups. And so we talked about, pastors talked about, they had been in the, taking people to treatment. They have received them when they came out of treatment. They've done many different funerals and everything else for family members, but something needs to change, and that the traditional model does not seem to really be working. And so we need to really create something different. We need a new model. And that was really the birth of Imani in terms of where we are, right now, that they were very much a part of that. The community was a part of that in terms of developing the model. And also, again, to really have churches be able to really make it their own. We did a lot of educational kinds of things. We talked about harm reduction. Also, we talked about also wraparound services that could actually happen for those that are in there, because many churches have very different ministries that go on. They have food banks. They have persons that are doing job readiness and some of those kinds of things. And also, every church has lawyers, they have doctors, they have social workers, and really being able to create ministries that will be able to wrap around persons that are receiving the services. So the intervention also is that there are 2 facilitators that are part of the project. They are from the churches. The churches pick their own facilitators. The churches are compensated for hosting the project. That's the other thing. A lot of people come to us, but there's no compensation and say that they want to work with the community. And so the church is compensated, the facilitators are compensated also, and then also the participants that attend the 22-week groups, intervention group and coaching are also paid as well, are given a stipend for transportation. And so also as a part of that also is that, even the pastors that are involved in it, both the Latin aid churches and also the as well as the African American churches. It's not about getting membership, but it's really about really providing ministry and providing services that we always have been in the healing business. And so after we did our first cohort, which was, we started out with the 12 weeks, many of the pastors said, well, we got to do something more than just these 12 weeks. People are still here. They're still wanting the services. What can we do different? And so that's how we developed the Next Steps group. Again, we developed that also together. And then as we talked about harm reduction, as we talked about addictions treatment, then it was also, what else can we do? And that's with the Imani U, where we're doing the research also, and also the telehealth is actually happening in the churches. They are receiving services in the churches, which again, the churches were a part of that. The pastors were a part of that. The community were a part of that. We also have had community conversations in which people from the community, we kind of talk about Imani. We talk about those things that are actually going on, those things that are working and those things that are not working. And what can we do to continue to be able to provide services, provide harm reduction services, to engage the community in the Imani project and the program. We've had many of our participants that this is the first time that they've ever completed anything, who also we've had graduations, we've had press conferences, We've had participants that have also told their story also. And again, we've had our facilitators also continue to be really engaged in the training piece of it. They're trained in the citizenship model. They're trained in the 8 dimensions of wellness, and then also trained in terms of being able to facilitate the actual groups. And so again, in most churches also, it becomes like a community in which also that the participants really feel like this is home, this is a community, and most of them said that they do see that the church is a safe place for them to come, to be, also to receive the services that they actually receive. So I just, again, this is a short version of everything. They coach them one-on-one again, but it's all been designed not without the community, but actually with the community coming together and continuing to look at ways and lessons learned, and continuing to research and do studies to really see, to make sure the effectiveness of this program. And if you have seen the data and look at the data, I know we're not doing it, but you will see that this program is very effective, and it's more effective than a lot of traditional groups. The data shows that this is really working, and that the community feel that this is an integral part, that they're an integral part of this project. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you so much. So here we go. We are beyond the time. I did want you all to know that the folks who did jump off all said that was wonderful, and I certainly agree with that. You all did amazing presentations, food for thought, highlighting key points. I feel inspired and energized by everything you all have shared and reminded us and taught us today. This is awesome. As I said, a lot of people need to jump off at 1. The presentation team did say they would be happy to stay on for the next until 1:30 to do more casual conversation. I think we can go ahead and stop the recording at this point.